Chapter 1. The Discovery. Amelia had always believed her life was normal, until the day everything changed. She was an ordinary woman with a simple routine: work, family, and the occasional weekend getaway. However, as she sat in her quiet living room, surrounded by her family's photos, the world outside her window seemed to blur. The ticking of the clock on the wall suddenly felt louder, sharper, like a constant reminder that time was something she could no longer ignore. It started with a dream, or what she thought was a dream. Amelia found herself in a vast empty space. There were no walls, no floor, just endless darkness and the sound of her heartbeat. She wasn't afraid. Instead, there was a sense of calm, as though she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. A woman appeared before her, glowing with an ethereal light. She wore an intricate gown that shimmered with silver threads, and her eyes were filled with a knowledge Amelia couldn't understand. "Your time has come, Amelia," the woman said softly, her voice echoing in the emptiness. "You have the power to bend time to your will, but with great power comes great sacrifice." Amelia tried to speak, but her words were swallowed by the vastness around her. The woman raised her hand, and in an instant Amelia's mind was flooded with visions, scenes from her past, her present, and terrifying glimpses of the future. Her family, the people she loved most in the world, were in grave danger. A tragedy was looming, one that would shatter everything she held dear. As quickly as it had come, the vision faded. Amelia woke up in her bed, drenched in sweat, her heart racing. It wasn't just a dream. She knew that now. The knowledge that had been implanted in her mind, the ability to control time, was real. Days passed, but the sensation lingered. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that time itself was slipping through her fingers. Every moment seemed to stretch and contract unnaturally, as if she were standing at the edge of reality, able to glimpse into the unknown. One evening, while sitting at the kitchen table, the truth finally revealed itself. Her son, Ethan, was laughing as he played with his toys. Suddenly, the clock on the wall struck 7. Amelia's gaze drifted to it, and without thinking, she reached out her hand. The second hand froze. Her heart skipped a beat. It was as if the world had stopped. A breathless silence filled the room. "Amelia?" Ethan's voice pierced the stillness, but it was as if his words were coming from a great distance. She stared at him, a mix of awe and fear in her eyes. In that moment, Amelia understood. She could control time. But what would she do with this newfound power? How could she save her family from the impending disaster she had seen in the vision? With the weight of the world pressing down on her, Amelia knew one thing for certain. She had to find out more. She had to learn how to master time before it ran out for her family. And so, her journey began. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The days following Amelia's discovery were filled with questions and uncertainty. At first, she tried to deny what had happened, thinking maybe she had imagined it, that it was just stress or exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, she knew it was real. The clock, frozen in time, had been proof enough. She spent hours at night staring at the hands of her family's clock, willing them to stop, to freeze, to rewind. Sometimes it worked. The time would pause, and she would feel the exhilarating power surge through her veins. Other times, it was as though the universe itself resisted her commands, refusing to obey her newfound authority. Amelia didn't know where to begin. There was no guide, no manual for what she was experiencing. The woman in her dream had only warned her of the sacrifice. What that meant, she still couldn't understand. But the visions she had seen of her family's future haunted her. She couldn't just stand by and let whatever tragedy was coming unfold. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amelia decided she had no choice but to experiment. She waited until everyone in her house was asleep, then stood in front of the large clock on the mantel. Her fingers tingled with anticipation. Closing her eyes, she concentrated. She could almost hear the woman's voice in her mind, urging her forward. She stretched out her hand and whispered the words she felt in her heart. Stop. The second hand froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Amelia felt as though she had reached into the fabric of existence itself, pulling at the threads of time. For a moment, the world stood still. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure of what she would find. And then she noticed something strange. The room had changed. The light from outside no longer streamed in through the windows. The walls seemed off, as though they were shifting, moving. The shadows were wrong. It was like she had fallen into another reality, one that bent and twisted around her. Panicking, Amelia snapped her hand back. Time resumed, and the room returned to normal, but her heart was pounding in her chest. Something had gone wrong. This wasn't what she had expected. She had only wanted to stop time for a moment, but she had felt something deeper, something darker. That night, as she lay in bed, the vision returned. The woman appeared again in her dreams, her silver gown now darker, her face more solemn than before. You have tasted the power, Amelia, the woman said, but you must learn to control it. There is a balance to time, and if you disrupt it too much, you will pay a price. Your family's future is not yet written, but the threads of time are fragile. You must be careful. Amelia awoke with a start, the fear of the woman's words hanging over her. She had only scratched the surface of what she could do, but already she could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. The next morning, she decided to talk to someone who might understand. Her best friend, Lucy, had always been a voice of reason, a calm presence in the chaos of Amelia's life. Maybe she could help her make sense of everything. They met at their usual cafe, a small, quiet place with a window view of the bustling streets outside. Amelia ordered her coffee, but barely tasted it as she leaned in to speak. Lucy, something happened to me, she began, her voice low. I can control time. Lucy raised an eyebrow, but instead of laughing, she leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean, control time? Like you can freeze it? Travel through it? Amelia nodded, her hands trembling slightly. I've stopped time before. I've seen things, Lucy. Things about my family's future. Terrible things. Lucy's face softened with concern. What kind of things? Amelia hesitated, unsure if she should share the full extent of the visions, but the images of her family in danger would not leave her mind. I saw them. Amelia's voice faltered. I saw my family in grave danger, Lucy. I don't know what will happen, but something bad is coming, and I have to stop it. I have to find a way. Lucy stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. You're not crazy, Amelia, but this power you have, it's not something you can ignore. If you really can control time, you need to be careful. You can't just mess with it without understanding the consequences. I know, Amelia whispered. But what if I can't save them in time? Lucy reached out and took her hand. Then you have to make sure you understand everything before you act. You need to learn how to control this power completely, and I'll help you. Amelia's heart felt a little lighter, but she knew the road ahead would not be easy. The knowledge of time and the threat to her family's future was too great to ignore. It wasn't just about saving them anymore. It was about understanding the true cost of what she had been given. And so the real journey began. The search for answers, for control, and for the truth about the sacrifices she might have to make. Chapter 3. The Price of Power. Amelia's newfound power weighed heavily on her. As the days passed, she found herself trying to balance the mundane tasks of life, work, taking care of her family, with the immense responsibility of controlling time. Every time she looked at the clock, she felt the urge to pause it again, to stop the world from moving. But the woman's warning echoed in her mind. You must be careful. Time is fragile. The idea of manipulating time had become both an obsession and a burden. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, waiting for her to slip. It wasn't just the visions of her family's fate. It was a deeper sense of foreboding, as though there were consequences waiting to unfold, consequences she couldn't yet understand. One evening, after a long day of work, Amelia returned home to find her son Ethan playing in the living room. He was building a fort with pillows. His face lit up with excitement as he called for her to join in. She smiled, but something in her gut twisted. She had seen him in the vision, lying motionless in a dark room, his life threatened by forces she couldn't comprehend. "Mom, come help me." Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. Amelia walked over, trying to shake off the lingering dread. She helped him stack the last pillow into place, but as her hand brushed against the fabric, she froze. The world around her seemed to slow. The sounds of the house, the ticking of the clock, everything faded into the background. Her mind was racing. She had done it again. The time had stopped, but it wasn't the usual stillness. This time the room felt heavy, suffocating. The air thickened, as if the very essence of reality was collapsing under the weight of her power. Amelia's heart raced as she realized the gravity of what she had just done. "Amelia?" Ethan's voice echoed, distant, like a faint whisper, but his lips hadn't moved. It was as if he was speaking from a place far beyond her reach. Panicking, she snapped her fingers, hoping to return things to normal. But nothing happened. The room was still suspended, frozen in place. Amelia's breath quickened as she tried again, but no matter how much she willed time to resume, it refused to obey. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadow, moving against the frozen world. It was as though something had crossed the threshold between time and space, entering her reality. The shadow was tall, its outline blurry, but its presence was undeniable. Amelia's pulse spiked. She stepped backward, clutching her chest. This was no longer about stopping time. Someone was coming for her. The warning from the woman in her dream came rushing back. The shadow grew more defined, taking shape. It was a figure, a man draped in dark robes. His face was obscured by a hood, but his eyes that glowed like molten gold, locked onto Amelia with a piercing intensity. "You have tampered with time, and for that you must pay the price," the figure said, his voice cold and commanding. "You are not the only one who holds such power. You are not the only one who dares to defy time's will." Amelia's heart raced. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The figure's lips curled into a smirk. "I am a keeper of time's balance, and you, Amelia, are a threat to it." With a flick of his wrist, the man reached out, and in an instant, time snapped back into motion. The world around her jolted as if waking from a deep sleep. The clock on the wall ticked once again, the soft sound of Ethan's voice filling the air. Amelia gasped, her knees weak as she tried to steady herself. The shadowy figure was gone, leaving only the echo of his words. The room, her home, felt normal again, but something had shifted within her. She had been warned, and now she realized the true cost of her power. The man's words echoed in her mind. "You are not the only one." Amelia had assumed she was alone in this struggle, that her gift was unique. But now she understood that others, like the mysterious figure, had mastered the art of time, and they were watching her. For the first time, Amelia felt the full weight of her responsibility. The power to control time wasn't a gift. It was a dangerous tool that could be used for good or ill. The consequences of her actions were far-reaching, and there were others who would stop at nothing to ensure time remained unchallenged. She had to learn everything she could to understand the true nature of her abilities before someone else came for her and for her family. Amelia walked to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. The world was still, as though holding its breath, waiting for her next move. She had only scratched the surface of her power, and now she had no choice but to dive deeper. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The journey had only just begun, but Amelia knew one thing for certain. Time was a force far beyond her comprehension, and if she didn't master it soon, the cost would be greater than she could imagine. Chapter 4. The Path to Mastery. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away faster than ever. Every step she took seemed to be shadowed by the looming threat of those who had warned her, those who controlled the flow of time. The figure in her living room, the mysterious keeper of time, had made it clear. Her power was not unique, and there were others who would stop at nothing to control it. With each passing day, her sense of urgency grew. Amelia couldn't afford to wait and learn on her own. She had to act now. The future of her family was at stake, and the only way to protect them was to master her abilities before someone else came for her. Her first step was to understand the origin of her power. The woman in her dream had said her time had come, that she had been chosen to wield the ability to control time. But why? What had set her apart from the others? In the days that followed, Amelia began to search for any clue that could explain what was happening to her. She scoured books on ancient lore, myths and legends, hoping to find some reference to time manipulation. But nothing she found felt right. The stories she read were vague, speaking of gods and immortals who controlled time, but there was no mention of a human like her, ordinary, but suddenly bestowed with such extraordinary abilities. Frustrated, she decided to seek out someone who might know more. Lucy, her closest friend, had always been resourceful and quick to offer practical advice. Amelia had confided in her about the strange, shadowy figure and her newfound powers, and Lucy had promised to help her, even if she didn't fully understand what was happening. "I think I know someone who might be able to help," Lucy said one evening as they sat together in the quiet of their local cafe. Her name is Ava. She's a historian, and I've heard she has an interest in ancient artifacts and mystical phenomena. If anyone knows about time manipulation, it's her." Amelia's heart raced. The thought of meeting someone who might know more about her abilities filled her with hope and dread in equal measure. Could Ava be the answer to all of her questions? Could she help Amelia understand what was happening to her and how to control it? The next day, Lucy arranged for them to meet Ava. They drove out of the city to a small, quiet town on the outskirts, where Ava lived in a secluded cottage surrounded by tall, ancient trees. When they arrived, the air seemed thick with an eerie stillness, as though time itself had slowed. The cottage appeared abandoned at first glance, but as they knocked on the door, it creaked open to reveal a woman in her late 30s, dressed in dark, flowing robes. "You must be Amelia," Ava said, her voice calm and measured. "Come in." Amelia hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The cottage was filled with old books, maps, and strange artifacts that seemed to pulse with energy. The walls were lined with shelves, holding relics from forgotten eras, timepieces, hourglasses, and symbols of ancient cultures. It was as though Ava's entire life had been dedicated to studying time itself. "Sit down," Ava gestured to a large worn chair near the fireplace. "Lucy has told me a little about you. You've discovered your ability to manipulate time. But I sense you don't fully understand what you're dealing with, do you?" Amelia nodded, her throat tight. "I can stop time, freeze it. But when I do, something feels wrong, like I'm not the only one in control." Ava's eyes glinted with recognition. "Ah, I see. You're not just manipulating time. You've tapped into a very old and powerful force, one that has been guarded for centuries." Amelia leaned forward, eager for answers. "What do you mean? Why me? Why now?" Ava's gaze grew somber. "There are many who have tried to control time throughout history. Some succeeded, but many failed. Those who attempted to disrupt the natural flow of time often paid a great price. The power to control time is both a gift and a curse, and it has a way of finding those who are capable of wielding it." "Why me?" Amelia repeated, her voice strained. "What makes me different?" Ava took a deep breath, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of an ancient hourglass on the table. "It's not about being different, Amelia. It's about the circumstances. Time is a living entity, and sometimes it chooses someone to act as its keeper. You are that person, whether you like it or not. The power you possess is ancient, older than you can imagine." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. "But there are others, like the man I saw in my home. He said I'm a threat." Ava nodded slowly. "Yes, the keeper of balance. He is one of many who believe that time must remain unchallenged. There are groups, secret organizations, that have existed for centuries to ensure that no one gains too much power over time. They will stop at nothing to preserve the flow of time as it is." Amelia's stomach tightened. "What happens if I can't control it? If I make a mistake?" "The consequences could be catastrophic," Ava said quietly. "Disrupting time's natural order can lead to ripples, small changes that multiply and destroy everything you've ever known. You must be careful. Time is fragile, and those who meddle with it must pay the price." Amelia's mind raced as she tried to comprehend everything Ava had said. She wasn't just playing with time. She was tampering with something far greater than she could understand. "But how do I control it?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ava's eyes softened. "To control time, You must first understand its essence. You must connect with it on a deeper level. There are ancient rituals, old texts, and forgotten techniques that can help you. But you must be willing to sacrifice. Time takes, and it demands balance. Amelia felt a surge of determination. She couldn't back down now. She had to protect her family, no matter what it cost. "I'll do whatever it takes," Amelia said, her voice steady. "Tell me what I need to do." Ava smiled faintly. "Then the journey begins. But remember this, time is not just something you can control. It's something you must live with. And that means facing the consequences of every choice you make." Amelia nodded, understanding for the first time that the path ahead would be anything but easy. But she was ready. She had to be. Chapter 5. The Sacrifice. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as Ava's words echoed in her mind. Time takes, and it demands balance. The weight of the statement lingered, pressing down on her as she left Eva's cottage with Lucy. There was no turning back now. She had learned the truth. Time wasn't just a power to be wielded. It was a force that could consume her if she wasn't careful. As the days passed, Amelia dove deeper into the ancient rituals and texts Eva had given her. The words were cryptic, full of symbolism and references to forgotten eras. But through her relentless study, she began to understand the essence of time. It was more than just numbers and clocks. It was a living, breathing entity that connected everything in the universe. Every moment, every second, was part of a delicate web that held the world together. Ava had told her that mastering time wasn't about controlling it, but about understanding it, feeling its pulse, its rhythm. And to truly master it, she needed to be willing to make a sacrifice. The thought of sacrifice haunted Amelia. What would she have to give up? Could she even make the right choice? Each time she used her power, she felt an emptiness, a hollowness that seemed to grow with each passing moment. It was as if the power she commanded was taking something from her, something she couldn't identify. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amelia stood in her living room, staring at the clock. She had been practicing, trying to control the flow of time with more precision, but the darkness that had followed her ability was always present. The room seemed colder, the air heavier every time she reached for the power. She had come to the realization that every time she stopped time, something else shifted, something more dangerous than she had imagined. She had to know. She needed answers. Without thinking, she closed her eyes and stretched out her hand. She whispered the words she had learned. Stop. The world around her froze, just like before. But this time, it felt different. The weight in the room was suffocating, pressing down on her, as if the fabric of time itself was pushing back. She could feel it. Something was coming. A shadow crossed her vision again, the keeper of balance. Before she could react, the figure emerged from the air, his golden eyes glowing with a cold intensity. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of inevitability. "You think you can master time, Amelia?" he asked, his voice smooth and chilling. "You've only begun to see its power, but it is not meant to be controlled by mere mortals." Amelia's heart raced as she stood her ground. "I'm not trying to control it. I'm trying to protect my family. I need to stop the future I've seen." The keeper's eyes narrowed. "You're blind to the truth. Time is not a tool for personal gain. It is a force of nature, and it must not be tampered with." Amelia's mind raced. "I have no choice. If I don't act, My family will be destroyed. The keeper's gaze softened, but only slightly. You misunderstand. Every action you take creates ripples. Time doesn't forget. Every change, no matter how small, carries consequences. You will lose more than you can imagine. Amelia swallowed hard, her thoughts swirling. What do I have to do to stop this? What is the price? The keeper took a step closer, his voice lowering to a whisper. The price is your humanity. You must choose. You can continue down this path, and you will gain the power to save your family. But you will lose yourself in the process. The more you manipulate time, the more you will slip away from the world you know. Eventually, you will no longer belong to the present. You will be trapped in between moments, lost in the flow of time. Amelia's stomach tightened. She had been warned, but she had never truly understood what the cost would be. You're asking me to give up everything, she said quietly, the realization dawning on her. The keeper nodded. Everything. You cannot hold on to your past and change the future. You cannot have both. If you choose to continue, you must be willing to sacrifice everything you hold dear, your family, your memories, your very existence in the world you know. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Her mind raced with images of her son, Ethan, her family, and the life she had built. How could she choose between saving them and losing herself? Was it even a choice? Suddenly, the weight of her power, the responsibility of it all, became too much to bear. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She had never imagined that something so small, something so seemingly harmless, could have such profound consequences. But she knew, deep down, that there was no turning back. The choice had already been made. I'll do it, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'll sacrifice whatever it takes. The keeper nodded once, a look of approval in his eyes. Then you will understand the true nature of time, and when you do, you will be able to protect your family, but at a cost. Be prepared, Amelia. Time will take what it is owed. With a final, sorrowful glance, the keeper vanished, leaving Amelia alone in the silence of her frozen world. Amelia stood, wiping away her tears, as the weight of her decision settled over her. She had chosen the path of sacrifice, the path that would change everything. She didn't know what would happen next, or what the future would hold, but she was ready to face whatever came, for her family, for the future, and for the price she would pay.